Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is Wednesday, so that means it's time for Missing and Murdered. So, there's a content warning. We talk about bad stuff here. Really bad stuff. With that being said, we're just going to get into it. It's not a super long one, so... the Keddie murders are an unsolved quadruple homicide that occurred over the night of April 11 through 12, 1981 in Keddie, California. The victims were Glenna Susan Sharp, daughter Tina Louise Sharp, son John Stephen Sharp, and John's friend Dana Hall Wingate. The murders took place in house number 28 of the Keddie Resort. The bodies of Wingate, Sue, and John Sharp were found on the morning of April 12th by Sue's 14-year-old daughter Sheila, who had been sleeping at a friend's house. Sue's two younger sons, Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were also in the house but were unharmed. Tina was missing from the scene. Tina remained a missing person until April 1984, when her skull and several other bones were recovered at Camp 18, California, near Feather Falls in Butte County, about 62 miles from Keddie. Multiple leads and suspects were examined in the intervening years, but no charges were filed. Several new leads were announced in the 21st century, including the discovery of a hammer in a pond in 2016 and the discovery of new DNA evidence. In July 1979, Glenna Susan Sharp, along with her 5 children, left her home in Connecticut after separating from her husband, James Sharp. They relocated to Northern California, where Sue's brother Don lived. Upon arriving in California, she rented a smaller trailer formerly occupied by her brother at the Claremont Trailer Village in Quincy. The following fall, she moved to house number 28 in the rural Sierra Nevada railroad town of Keddie. The house was much larger than the trailer and had become available when Plumas County's Sheriff Sylvester Douglas Thomas vacated the property. She resided there with her 15-year-old son John, 14-year-old daughter Sheila, 12-year-old daughter Tina, and 2 younger sons, 10-year-old Rick and 5-year-old Greg. On April 11, 1981, at around 11:30 a.m., Sue, Sheila, and Greg drove from the residence of their friends, the Meeks family, to retrieve Rick, who was attending baseball tryouts at Gennester Field in Quincy. They happened upon John and his friend Dana Hall Wingate hitchhiking at the mouth of the canyon from Quincy to Keddie, and then drove them about 6 miles away to Keddie. 2 hours later, at around 3:30 p.m., John and Dana hitchhiked back to Quincy, where they may have had plans to visit friends. Around this time, the boys were seen in the city's downtown area. That same evening, Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Seabolt family, who lived in adjacent number 27, while Sue remained at home with Rick, Greg, and the boys' young friend Justin Smart. Sheila departed house number 28 shortly after 8 p.m. to sleep at the Seabolts. Tina, who had been watching television at the Seabolt residence, returned to number 28 after asking what time it was at 9:30. At approximately 10 a.m. on the morning of April 12th, Sheila returned to number 28 and discovered the dead bodies of Sue, John, and Dana in the house's living room. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords. Tina was absent from the home, while the 3 younger children, Rick, George, and Justin, were found physically unharmed in an adjacent bedroom. Upon discovering the scene, Sheila rushed back to the Seabolt's house, and Jamie Seabolt retrieved Rick, Greg, and Justin through the bedroom window. He later admitted to having briefly entered the home through the back door to see if anyone was still alive, potentially contaminating evidence in the process. The murders of Sue, John, and Dana were especially vicious. 2 bloodied knives and 1 hammer were found at the scene. Blood spatter evidence from inside the house indicated that the murders had all taken place in the living room. Sue was discovered lying on her side near the living room sofa, nude from the waist down and gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, which had been secured with tape. She had been stabbed in the chest and her throat was stabbed horizontally, the wound passing through her larynx and nicking her spine, and on the side of her head was an imprint matching the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB pellet gun. You know what I'm talking about? John's throat was slashed. Dana had multiple head injuries and had been manually strangled to death. Autopsies determined that Sue and John died from the knife wounds and blunt force trauma, and Dana died by asphyxiation. Sheila and the Seabolt family, with which Sheila had spent the night in the neighboring home, heard no commotion during the night. A couple living in nearby 16 was awakened at 1:15 a.m. by what sounded like muffled screaming. Justin's stepfather, Martin Smart, a neighbor and main suspect, claimed that a claw hammer had inexplicably gone missing from his home. In addition to interviewing the Smarts, detectives interviewed numerous other locals and neighbors. Several, including members of the Seabolt family, recalled seeing a green van parked at the Sharps' house at around 9 p.m. Justin offered conflicting stories of the evening and stated that he had dreamed details of the murders. In this later account of events, told under hypnosis, he claimed to have seen Sue with 2 men. Based on Justin's descriptions, composite sketches of the 2 unknown men were produced by Harlan Embry, a man with no artistic ability and no training in forensic sketching. It was never explained why, with access to the Justice's Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's top forensic artists, law enforcement chose to use an amateur who sometimes volunteered to help local police. In press releases accompanying the sketches, the suspects were described as in their late 20s to early 30s. One stood between 5 foot 11 inches, 6 foot 2 with dark blonde hair, and the other between 5 foot 6 and 5'10 with black greasy hair. Both wore gold-framed sunglasses. Rumors regarding the crimes being ritualistic or motivated by drug trafficking were dismissed by Plumas County Sheriff Doug Thomas, who stated in the week following the murders that neither drug paraphernalia nor illegal drugs were found in the home. Tina's disappearance was initially investigated by the FBI as a possible abduction, although it was reported on April 29, 1981 that the FBI had backed off the search as the California State Department of Justice was doing an adequate job and made the FBI's presence unnecessary. This is why it's still unsolved, right? On April 11, 1984, the 3rd anniversary of the murders, a bottle collector discovered the cranium portion of a human skull and part of a mandible at Camp 18 near Feather Falls in neighboring Butte County, roughly 5 miles from Feather Falls, California. The remains were confirmed by a forensic pathologist to be those of Tina in June of 1984. Shortly after announcing the discovery, the Butte County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous call that identified the remains as belonging to Tina, but the call was not documented. Of course not. A tape containing a recording of the call was found at the bottom of an evidence box at some point after 2013 by a deputy who was assigned to this case. So, 20-some-odd years later, they found it. The house in which the murders occurred was demolished in 2004. According to a 2016 article published by the Sacramento Bee, Martin Smart had left Keddie and driven to Reno, Nevada shortly after the murders. While there, he sent a letter to his wife, Marilyn, ruminating on personal struggles in their marriage, which he stated, "I've paid the price of your love and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." In a 2016 interview, Gamberg stated the letter was overlooked in the initial investigation and was never admitted as evidence. He later criticized the quality of the initial investigation, saying, quote, "You could take someone just coming out of the academy and they'd have done a better job," end quote. He's probably not wrong, but again, you have to remember 1980s, they didn't have the technology we have now. So could they have? Maybe. A counselor whom Smart regularly visited also alleged that he'd admitted to the murders of Sue and Tina, but claimed I didn't have anything to do with the boys. He allegedly told the counselor that Tina was killed to prevent her from identifying him, as she had, quote, "witnessed the whole thing," end quote. John Betty, another suspect who was in the same neighboring cabin as Smart, allegedly had ties to organized crime in Chicago. He died in 1988. On March 24, 2016, a hammer matching the description of the one Smart had claimed to have lost was discovered in a local pond and taken into evidence by Plumas County Special Investigator Mike Gamberg. Plumas County Sheriff Greg Hagwood, who was 16 years old at the time of the murders and knew the Sharp family, state the location it was found, it would have been intentionally put there. It would not have been accidentally misplaced. Gamberg also stated that at that time, 6 potential suspects were being examined. In April 2018, Gamberg stated that DNA evidence recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. I couldn't find anything, though, that told me what came of that, like who the living suspect was or what came of it. I don't know why that was never, released, but maybe because it didn't go anywhere and it ended up being nothing. I'm not sure. But yeah, and that's the story of the Keddie Cabin murders. Super sad. Really is sad, though. Anyway, don't do anything I wouldn't do. Cautiously kind to others. Make good choices, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!